Welcome to X Marks the Spot podcast. The story you're about to listen to is all true. The only thing that has been changed are the people's names and their locations to protect their identity. Everything else has actually happened to myself and my guest in the story we are about to share today. And with that, let's get started. Welcome back, everybody, to X Marks the Spot podcast. My guest is still Maricella. We are doing part 2 of our last one and we are now jumping into 10 years later. Basically, what we're going to be covering is our reconnection with the people that we lost our virginity to. And so, Mari, thank you again for still being here.
Yes, of course.
And let's go back in. So, last we left off, you two broke up. He was kind of fighting for it, this and that, but you're like, no, I don't want this. And you guys, in a sense, ended it and went your separate ways. Yep. So now, let's talk about when you two reconnected. So how did that go? What happened? Why did it happen? So please dive in. Let us know.
Oh my God, this is my favorite story so far. All right, so yes, thanks for having me on the show again. This is great. I have so much to talk about and unload. So here we go. So this is 2020, right? LOL, because 2020 was a lot for everyone. But I will say that emotionally, it was a lot for me. So yeah, let's just briefly. This 2009, we broke up in February because I broke it off, and I felt good about it. I went about my life. I moved to San Francisco, started my life. Dated other people, went to school, had jobs. I created a whole life in the Bay Area, and it was pretty good. And then I graduated fashion school, and I was like, hell with it. I'm moving to New York. And I did. And I will say briefly, I was dating someone on and off for 7 years. And then all of a sudden, Goma decides to come back into my life. And I'm like, what? This is insane. And here's the biggest kicker. He came back to me 10 years later. I shit you not. On the same day we broke up.
Oh. So
Yes.
It wasn't, you're not talking about the guy that you dated. You're talking about he came back.
Goma and I broke up, I believe. It is February 23rd.
And he came back.
2009. And then he came back on February 23rd, 2020.
Whoa.
And I will preface real quick what I was going through in my life, and just because it made sense to why he came back in my life. So I was going through a series of health problems. I had just been told that I had a silent stroke. A silent stroke is a stroke that you have that you don't know you're having. And that was for a plethora of reasons. And I was also dating someone. I was already in a committed relationship, and he came back in my life. And I remember thinking, wow, blast from the fucking past. And here's the thing. So the day before he came back into my life, he had messaged me on Facebook.
So
the day before, though, I
upgraded.
had just found out about my silent stroke, and that was a lot for me. Like emotionally, spiritually, physically, you name it. It was a lot for me. And then the next day, which happened to be a Friday, it was my Friday of the week, which means I had Saturday, Sunday off. I was awaiting a message from my actual boyfriend because I had told him, hey, here's what's been going on with me with my health. I would like to talk about it. I need your support. And I remember getting a Facebook notification thinking that it was my actual boyfriend, and it was not. It was my ex-boyfriend, Goma.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, whoa, blast from the past. So Goma is like, hey, long time no talk or see. Let's catch up. I'll call you tomorrow if you want. And I remember thinking, holy shit, like, what? Okay, fine. Let's have a chit chat. So I did give him my number and I was like, listen, I happen to be off for the weekend. Yeah, give me a call over the weekend. Whatever, let's catch up. I didn't think one single thing about it. I just remember thinking, wow, this is Goma. Sure. Let's have a chit chat. Even though I had wished and I was waiting for an actual call or message from my actual boyfriend, which I will get back into in a different podcast.
A different episode.
Anyway,
yes.
Yeah, different episode for that one. So the next day was Saturday. I wake up and I get a text message from Goma. He's like, yeah, let me call you a little after 1, which is perfect because I was just getting up and doing what I need to do for the morning. And then he calls me up. And I'm looking at my cell phone. I'm like, shit, this is it. I haven't spoken to this dude since, February 23rd, 2009. Technically, I did see him a little bit after that, but I'll get into that in a moment. Okay. I remember picking up the phone. And I was like, hey, what's going on? How are you? Tell me everything that's been going on in the last 10 years. And so that's what we did. And 3 hours later, we were able to hash out our life and everything that happened in the last 10 years. And it was insane. And, we had so much to uncover. And I was so happy that he didn't fucking hate my guts for breaking up with him all those years ago. But we had kind of talked about the breakup too and how it was really good for both of us and how he learned a lot about himself. And of course I did too. And you know what? Like life happens as it will. And it did. And I'm glad that the breakup wasn't something that he was going to hold against me.
Yeah.
That would have been silly. Let's be honest. It's a stupid breakup. But it was really good to kind of catch up with him and stuff. So I will say when I moved to San Francisco, I would say maybe a year and a half into it, I actually ended up running into him. And it was a little awkward because I hadn't seen him since the breakup, which was obviously a year and a half kind of into it and stuff. But I had told him that, hey, I'm in San Francisco. Here's my life. I'm in fashion school and I'm working all these jobs. And so we did actually meet up for dinner and drinks. And it was cool. It was a little awkward. But that was it. And then after that one night of, dinner and drinks, I didn't see him again. And then 10 years later in 2020, that's when he decided to come back. So I thought I'd add that in just because I wanted to tell you that, we did actually see each other at least once. And I knew then that he didn't hate me then for the breakup. And in 2020, he definitely didn't. So anyway, so it was a little crunchy at the time because when he came into my life, I was like, okay, this is weird. Should I even consider having him as a friend? I was dating someone, obviously, and my relationship with the guy I was dating wasn't the best. Our communication was awful. I wasn't happy. He wasn't happy and stuff. So I did end up keeping in contact with Goma. He would kind of just check in on me and stuff. And I didn't think much of it at all. And then eventually, fast forward to May, I actually did break up with the guy I was dating once and for all. And that was a huge deal for me because that was a long time coming and something I probably should have done a long time ago. So
it became the self-prophecy of this has to happen. But it's crazy because then I'm sure you're about to jump into it. It's going to be this long relationship ended, and then now the next part's going to come in. And now after the breakup, how long was it before you two reconnected again? Was it a week? Was it a month? Was it the same day kind of thing? You two broke up, you're like, man, I got a lot of shit going on, and then it's Goma, oh look, he texts me.
Are you talking about the one and only time that we saw each other?
No, I'm talking about now. After you and your long relationship one ended, when did Goma reach out again?
Now, I will say, when Goma reached out in February, we talked every day.
Oh, okay.
We talked every day, and it was super innocent. Mm-hmm. It was about stupid shit. He actually loves podcasts and other nerdy crap. So it kept me busy to think about other things that he wanted to talk about. And he knew that I was still working as an optician before I lost my job, of course, due to the pandemic, like most people.
Yep.
So he and I had our schedule. He was still working at a bakery, but it's not the kind of bakery you would think it is. It's like weed bakery, like they would make edibles.
Oh, so the best kind of bakery.
Absolutely. So that's what he did. You know, he was in charge of making the butter for it, and that's kind of what he was doing. So we had our schedules until we lost that due to the pandemic. So the pandemic is kind of what added to the layer of drama between my boyfriend and I at the time, and we were kind of heading towards our last downfall as per usual. My boyfriend and I should have broken up and stayed broken up years ago, but me trying to give it the benefit of the doubt decided, hey, let's try this again. Let's date again. And of course it didn't work out. Yeah. So
I mean, everybody tries to do that. Like they see that like glimmer of light in that person. They're like, you know what? They're doing a bit better. Let me try it again. And I mean, I'm sure people are like, oh my God, what happened there?
Sure.
And again, we're going to get back into that one day. But
so let's fast forward to May, because that's when things started to heat up between him and I. I had realized that.
Okay. I'm excited.
I know. So all of it felt very nostalgic. You know, I hadn't spoken to Goma in like 10 years, and I was just reeling off a breakup. So when he kind of came in, I realized that he was sort of filling a void. And I have to say it because I don't know what other way to describe it. I remember he was coming out of a breakup himself, right? And his last relationship happened to be a very long relationship. And I want to say it was pretty good until it wasn't. And then it ended very toxic. Ooh. I'm not going to go into it because that's not my story to tell. But I will say that it left him pretty damaged. So when he came into my life, I can tell that he was looking for a companion. And I'm not surprised that he would come back to me, considering that our relationship back when we were 18 was a very loving and open and very easy relationship because we were each other's first love.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you're coming out of a very toxic breakup, why wouldn't you want to go back to something that felt safe and loving, especially when you're trying to heal? So when he came into my life, I thought, okay, you're obviously looking for that, and I don't mind it because I'm coming out of my breakup and I feel pretty lonely too. And especially since we're heading into 2020 where all of us were in lockdown. So our routine became, he was still working. He would get off work, but even then he would text me and we would talk about all sorts of things, the most random things. And then at the end of the night, when he'd come back home, he would suggest like a TV show or a movie that we would watch. You know, I would set up my Netflix or Hulu, and he would set up his Netflix or Hulu, and we would literally press play at the same time.
You guys would do the movie nights.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've done those before. They're kind of fun.
Kind of romantic. Yeah. You know, that's all you have, you know, distance wise. And, you know, we were doing this during a pandemic and we were doing this post relationships. We had just been through a breakup. So it felt very nice and nostalgic, and I wasn't mad at it. And it was a nice distraction even on my end because that meant that I didn't have to face my breakup for the last and I don't know, 7th, 8th or 9th, 10th time. And, you know, he would text me every day. He would do everything I had wanted my last ex to do. He gave me the time, the energy. He would put in the effort. And it was funny because I was thinking, I'm still getting over my ex. I don't feel any type of way towards him, but this is nice attention. This is the kind of attention that I wanted from my most recent ex. But that's all I ever wanted was time and effort. And Goma gave me that, just like he gave me that when we first dated. And I remember thinking, wow, even after all of these years, you're so consistent with this type of effort. And I'm so glad that that hadn't changed.
Yeah. Well, especially because that's also very hard to come by.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's not whether it's a guy and a girl or anything, or, or, whatever the partner is. Everybody's always like that. Like, you will always be that person once in your life where you're not the one that's giving the attention. You think you are.
Yeah.
But a lot of times you're not. And it's amazing that he was doing that.
Yeah.
And I mean, it doesn't seem like he had an agenda. Like he's like, oh, if I do these things, like she's going to send me a picture of her tits or something. Like,
right. No.
Yeah.
No. He didn't care one way or another. He just wanted someone to talk to him, and that was me. And I was like happy to talk to him and stuff. And it was nice because I wanted that attention too, especially going into a pandemic for the first time in my life. And, I had him to look forward to in a way that, he would get off work and we'd have movie night or we'd watch a TV show together, anime or not. And it was something to look forward to. And it was a nice distraction. And then on top of that, it was nice to like reconnect with him because he was someone at one point in my life that I did love. And it was nice to see who he was even 10 years later.
Yeah.
And to realize later that he hadn't really changed that much. He was still Goma, like at the end of the night. He was still very attentive and caring, and he had all these like same and similar qualities that I had once loved. And I remember thinking, wow, I'm so glad that life hadn't really broke you and changed you, that you were still very much the same. And so we were doing this whole back and forth for a while. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to go back home. I'm going to travel back home in August and I want to see you. And I remember thinking, I'm nervous. I'm so nervous. I hadn't seen this guy in 10 years. I don't know what's going to happen. I can't assume what's going to happen.
Yeah. Did you think something was going to happen? Like, you're like, man, I'm going to see him and we're both going to be like, bedroom.
No, I didn't want to assume that because I felt like if I did, I would be let down by my own expectations. So
Gotcha.
I kind of went into it just kind of open-ended. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to see my family. Mm-hmm. I'm going to see some friends. And then I'm going to see him. And I'm glad that I had all of those other people to see so that it wouldn't just be a trip about him and him only, right?
Okay.
So I go back home and I see some friends and I see him. And when I see him, I'm just dumbfounded by how easy it felt. It felt like old times, like nothing had changed.
Right.
And I was like, okay, what does this mean? Like, have I like fallen again for this guy? Or is this just nostalgia playing its part? And I'm like a fool in this. Yeah. So it was really hard to figure that out. And I remember thinking, I bet he's going through the same thing. I need to not take this so seriously because I don't want to be hurt again, especially since, being with him was so easy because he was my first love. And with that being said, because he was my first love, I didn't have any other love or any other person to compare it to. So it was the easier love.
Yeah.
But considering that I had other loves during the 10 years, it was hard to kind of like forget that. I can't fall for this guy again. I can't, I don't want him to be a rebound and whatnot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you never actually want them to be
No,
that.
I didn't want to be his rebound. I didn't want, I didn't want that for both of us. It was really hard. So
I know you mentioned that he was a nostalgia feel and everything. Was it more or anything along the lines of like, did you ever think like it was a security blanket kind of thing? Because I know some people have done that where they went back to an ex, or it was just that comfort because it was that. It was like, again, as you're saying, like it's the nostalgia feel. But I also feel like I know who and like what their mannerisms and everything will be. So it's like, it's that blanket of like, well, I'm used to this.
Sure.
Was it anything like that? Or was it again, like you were saying, like the nostalgia feel of what you guys had and also something kind of new?
It felt new because we were not who we were when we were 18.
Yeah.
And it did feel like it had the potential of being something.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, why did I break up with him in the first place? Oh, that's right. Because he wasn't ambitious enough. Right. And it's pretty selfish, even 10 years later, especially at this point where I had other things for myself lined up, things I was proud of, things that I want for my life, even still. And I had that like kind of like clawing at me in the back of my head. And I remember thinking, okay, is he really the one? Is this it? Has he come back into my life because he's the one? I had to go through all these shitty relationships for him to come back to my life. And then I realized, okay, you were the one, I guess. Come on, let's do this. And I, for a split second, I did want to believe that. Did want to believe like, sure, fine, let's do this. 10 years later, we're adults. We've gone through shitty relationships. We've learned a lot about ourselves. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And I realized, no, because he still was not ambitious enough. Even still.
Oh, no. So,
and I wanted it to work out. I was like, I think you're a great guy on paper. You're patient and loving. You want everything for me. You're proud of me. You're like my biggest fan. And he really was, but that was not enough for me.
See, it's crazy that 18-year-old you knew exactly what you wanted. And he still, and I mean, that's the other thing too, because you basically told him that when you guys broke up.
Yeah.
And he knew he wanted to chase you and this and that.
Sure.
And it's crazy on how something like that didn't change. Because you would think it would.
Right.
Like someone would be like, man, that's going to stick in my brain. I've had plenty of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And all the very serious ones have always been, I take a lesson from them. Each of them. Mm-hmm. Like if I wasn't this way, then I had to be better, because then the next girl is probably going to want that.
Right.
And then it kept going and going. And then next thing I know, it's like, all right, now I'm a complete adult now. And it's like, and I've learned so many lessons, but it's crazy on how Goma didn't learn basically one big thing from you. And that was it's like, dude, you are perfect. I could write it all out, but I need this one big thing from you. Like, be ambitious about anything. Mm-hmm. Now that's the thing. If he was ambitious about, top of my head, just something stupid. Let's say he was like, I am ambitious about making this ant farm.
Sure.
The best ant farm in the world.
Right.
Would that be enough for you, or would you want?
That would have been enough for me. I think if someone was ambitious enough and passionate about something and they wanted to pursue it, I would be so behind that. I'd be like, yes, I get it. I understand that energy. I think I just want someone to match my energy. And I'm such a dreamer that I think that he loved that about me. He adored it. He adored it back when I was 18. He adored it now. And I think he was falling in love with the idea of who I was and who I am. And I think I was doing the same out of like nostalgia, thinking, yes, this could work. Maybe this was how things were supposed to be. Maybe I'm the dreamer. I'm the ambitious one. Let me go to London because that's where I want to be next. and let me get my ducks in a row and get my career popping, and then you can be there for me along the ride to support me. And I'm thinking, that's just not going to be enough. Like, because I didn't think that he wanted anything grand like that. I'm not saying that he needed to be rich and support me. Yeah. I can do that myself. I just wanted someone to match my energy. And even 10 years later, he didn't do that part. But he was still loving and attentive. He would text me. He would like just be there and be present, even during 2020 when we were in lockdown, which was huge. And it was a blessing because it was a nice sort of distraction. And I had a lot to learn about myself, and I had shadow work to iron out. And I realized, okay, what's your real purpose? Why have you come back into my life? Mm-hmm. And I had to figure that out.
So, all right. So we got into this part and everything. You went back, you visited family, you got to see him and everything. Mm-hmm. How many times did you go back and then you two saw each other? Because obviously this is a story that's not ending with you two are together. This is a story of you guys reconnected, but then it ended again.
Right.
So how long did this, relationship kind of go on for until, again, it happened with this, where you're saying, like, I realized again, there's no ambition or anything. How long did you let it go on before you were like, it has to officially end?
So I saw him in August. Mm-hmm. And that was a big, that was a moment for both of us. We had this huge buildup over the last couple of months during our time in the pandemic.
Right.
And I was like, hey, I'm coming back to Sacramento in August. I want to see you. So we had that to look forward to. So when I saw him, it was easy. It was as if we were 18 again and we were able to be ourselves, except we weren't. We were much older and we had more to speak on. But our rapport and our connection was still the same. We had our time together, and we even had an Airbnb pretty much where we had time together to hang out and stuff and reconnect. And yes, if you're wondering, we did have sex.
God, if you two didn't, I'd be like, this is a complete waste of time.
No, the sexual chemistry was still there. I will say that it was not the same as if we had sex for the first or second time when we were 18, 19. Mm-hmm. In fact, the chemistry wasn't really there sexually. I remember having sex with him thinking, wow, this feels amazing, but it doesn't feel right. And I couldn't tell you really why. I think that energy doesn't lie. And when that energy is not there, it's just not there. Mm-hmm. And this buildup was probably the hottest thing about our situation. And then when we finally did the deed, it just wasn't as I expected.
Yeah. It was basically I'm building it up in my mind as it like, oh man, there's going to be this like passion or anything. And then like you get there and, you're like, oh, this sucked. It's basically like, like right now it's summertime. Everybody wants to go to the pool. Everyone wants to jump in the pool and everything.
Right.
And then, if there's that community pool, you're like, yo, I can't wait to go. And then you get there and you're like, oh, it's closed.
Right.
Like you build it up so much.
Of course. In your head, it's so much hotter. Yeah. And when it happens, you're like, this fucking sucks. I mean, it didn't suck. It was good. We had sex 3 or 4 times. Mm-hmm. But one of us finished, one of us didn't. And then the other time, one of us finished, but the other one did not. So it was like that back and forth. I'm like, what's wrong with us? What's wrong with our rhythm? Right. It's just not there. And you can't fight that sort of thing. So I figured, fine, maybe we're just having a bad moment. But really, even weeks after, and I had gotten back to New York and I had time to ponder on our time together, I realized, okay, it was lovely. It was great, but it was not what I expected. And I think he felt the same. So our talking every day, our texting every day started to kind of diminish. I didn't hear from him often. I didn't text him often. He didn't text me. We didn't send Snapchats like we did every single day. He didn't text me good morning or say good night to me every night. And it was started to kind of fade away. And I realized, okay, this is what it was.
Yeah.
We were pretty much each other's rebound. And I had to accept that.
Yeah.
Of course, silly me. It was never going to happen. It didn't happen the first time. We broke up for a reason. I had to acknowledge that even 10 years later. And that was one of many silly things I had to learn and work through in my shadow work during 2020, especially since I had just broken up with someone else in May. Who do I think I am? I mean, I had exes galore, like, to think about and iron out and get over those relationships and feelings, especially even him, who was my first boyfriend ever. So I remember at one point I told him, hey, I'm coming back in October. I want to see you again. In fact, I want us to make a trip to Santa Cruz. And I was doing all these things and I was trying to plan it out. And I was trying to take control of planning it out. And I felt like I was giving him anxiety because I was trying to ask him, like, so what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Are these days great? Can you take this time off? I was asking him to help me plan our trip. And it felt like I was having to pull teeth because he just wasn't about it. He wasn't into it like I was. And I remember thinking, that's sad because I was so excited to go back to Santa Cruz.
Yeah. Who's not excited to go?
Yeah. I mean, we were dating. Obviously, I was at UC Santa Cruz at the time, so it would have felt super nostalgic.
Yeah.
And I remember trying to, like, plan that out with him, and it just did not work. He didn't want it. And I can tell when I was trying to plan it. So I thought, okay, fine. Let me know. So if you don't want to go to Santa Cruz, then I'm going to go to Santa Cruz. And then I can plan for myself, and I don't have to worry about you. Yeah. And I can tell that at one point or another, I just had to tell him that. And then eventually a week or two went by where we didn't even speak at all. We didn't text, no Snapchats, nothing. Jeez. And I'm not going to lie. The night he decided to reach out to let me know that he did not want to be on this trip with me in Santa Cruz was the same night I happened to be on a Tinder date with someone else. I'm happy to talk about in a different podcast episode. So it was really awkward and I was already drinks in. Right. And I remember he messaged me saying, sorry, I don't think this is going to work out. I don't want to go to Santa Cruz. And me being scrappy when I'm drunk, I told him, fine. I don't want you to be on this trip with me in Santa Cruz. And I don't want to talk to you. And, you know, I remember saying this over Snapchat and I remember thinking, fine, I'll talk to you tomorrow. And I never texted him. I never called him tomorrow. I just decided not to reach out to him the next day. And he never reached out to me either. In fact, he never reached out to me ever again. And I never reached out to him either. So our ending was in the middle of September.
See, what's kind of funny about that is your guys' breakup,
right?
Your recent one was what I was expecting more as an 18-year-old. You guys had almost a healthier breakup when you were younger. You guys had a more adult breakup at that age than most people do now. And I mean, clearly, because it was literally, honestly, in my head, all I thought of was like 5-year-olds like, well, I don't want to date you anymore. It's like, fine, don't text me. It's like, you're a bugger. Yeah. Like, it's so funny on how that ended. But I mean, at the same time, he blew it out of proportion. Like, he could have just been like, hey, you know, I'm not feeling up for Santa Cruz, but I would still like to see you or something. But he let it go on, meaning he wanted to try. But that's the other thing too. Like, so from Monty's in my hometown, Sacramento, to Santa Cruz, it's what, 4 hours maybe of a drive, depending on traffic.
Yep. Far enough.
Yeah. And if anybody in California is like, no, it's not, it's like, whatever. Like, point is, it's not that far.
Sure.
You're not basically going like across the country or anything to get to a certain city. And then that's the other thing too. Like there's memories for you guys there. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting on how he almost like panicked about going back. It's like, but of course he wants that nostalgia too. It's like he's talking to you again.
Sure.
You guys were in a sense dating again. You guys had these cute Netflix nights and everything. And I mean, that's the other thing too, is you guys had the long distance relationship struggles when you were first starting.
Yeah.
I mean, again, we mentioned it before. We only had MySpace at that time. Mm-hmm. We didn't have, oh, hey, let's go on the phone and let's try and both watch this movie. It's like, I don't have cable. It's like, well, I guess we're both fucked. It's like, I'll describe it to you.
Yeah.
And now Jason, the guy with the mat, he's killing her. It's like, wow, I don't want to hear any of this.
Sure, yeah.
So it's funny on how you guys had it almost easier. Sure. We have video chat. We have everything of being able to do that.
Yeah. And
yet it was harder for him to, in a sense, just open up to even just tell you like, hey, I don't feel like going to Santa Cruz. But that right there also says a lot about, like you were saying, about his ambitions and stuff. Like he couldn't even help plan a trip, not even a very far trip. You guys weren't going to Europe. You guys were just going out of town. So it's crazy that it would had to be like that. I mean, for what ended up happening with me, with who we talked about in part 1. So we broke up, and I remember it was like a couple months later, and she kind of was losing it. I was still talking to her here and there just to make sure she was okay, because I knew she was going through some stuff. Yeah. And I remember she used to call me about like 5 to 10 times a day, and if I wasn't picking up, she would text me. I was getting concerned because I was like, this is kind of creepy. Sure. So we're like, so when I was younger, I would have school, I'd have high school, and then I'd come home, and then I would go to my martial arts, and I would train there for like 5 hours a day. Right. And then I'd come home and I'd have to do homework and blah, blah, blah. But she like knew my schedule, but she would still like call me, and it was really frustrating because I went, I don't know why you're calling me. And a lot of her things, she was like, I just want to talk. I went, about? She's like, I just want to talk. And I was like, I'm okay listening to your problems. Like, what's going on? Right. And it was nothing. She would just be like, no, I just want to talk to you. I went, what do you want to know? How was your day? Sure. I'm like, oh my God. This went on for almost 2 months. Okay. And I started dating somebody else, maybe like a year after. But that was the thing. It was such a weird time. Like when I started dating this other person, she came back, but at like the worst time. Right. And like there was no like signs or anything of this person and I like, oh man, we're getting serious. But what almost kind of drew me later. So, drama, blah, 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 like throughout the high school years. We reconnected after high school. Okay. Funny enough, it was actually around the time like you and I were hanging out, and you invited me to a July 4th thing at your little part of town. Sure. So I went to that, and then her and I actually got to talk things out, and it was interesting because she was dating somebody at that time, but we both were like, you know what, we have some stuff to air out. Right. And we did. And I actually brought that up. I was like, that was kind of fucking crazy of you. She doesn't remember it. She did not remember. She's like, I called you like a few times. I was like, yeah, like every hour when I was like home around, like you knew I would be home around this time. Sure. And that's when you started calling. She had no recollection of this. Oh God. And I had to. I was like, on average, you were calling me about 5 times a day. I was like, that's on top of like another maybe like 5 to 10 text messages. No recollection of it. And here's the thing, like, I looked her in the eyes, and like her face of like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, she really doesn't. She actually didn't know what she was doing. She thought she was just reaching out. And I'm not sure if she was trying to reach out and like maintain something or trying to get me back, because there was no like plan. There was no agenda. There was no like, hey, let's hang out or anything.
Sure.
It was just I just want to talk to you. I was like, about what? Like my day? I was like, it was boring.
Yeah.
Like it was the same thing. Like I went to school. I went to my martial arts. I trained. I got my ass kicked. And then I came home. I ate dinner. And now I'm doing homework. Like, what else do you want to know?
Sure.
I'm like, I'm a teenager in high school. Like, there's nothing interesting about my life.
Right.
So,
that's funny.
So we had that conversation. And then I think it was like maybe a year later. I knew her and that guy broke it off. She moved to a different part of town. And she actually invited me over because we were like chatting again. And I think it was like on the MySpace days.
Right.
It might have been early Facebook, but I'm pretty sure it was one or the other.
Sure.
So I went over to her place. We kind of hung out for a little bit. And then we're hanging out in her room. And I went, uh-oh, this could be bad. And we ended up making out and kind of fooling around.
Oh.
And that was the thing, too. It, like, had that, like, nostalgia feel.
Sure.
And it was I was like, I think we know what our mistakes were before.
Sure.
So we did that. We started chatting a bit more. And then the next time I went over to her place, we, like, kind of made out. But she was very distracted. And it was to the point where I was like, I feel like she's talking to somebody. I was like, which is very weird on my part, because it's like, why am I even here?
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Fair.
It's like, well, if you're interested in this person, it's like, I shouldn't even be here at all.
Yeah.
So nothing was really happening. And she like kind of did the whole like, oh, I got to go take this really quick. I went, I'll just leave. Like,
yeah,
I can just go. I'm like, it's not a big deal to me. I'm like, you obviously have something else going on. So that happened. She apologized later. She's like, I have been talking to this guy. I'm like, all right, great.
Fine.
I'm like,
finally.
Just then, why did you even invite me over if
Fair.
it was getting serious,
right.
or like if it seemed serious?
Yeah.
So, that was like one of the last times I really talked to her. I think she contacted me again like 6 months or so later.
Sure.
She came over to my place one time. I was with one of her friends. We were all just kind of hanging out. And I remember they both were dating these guys. And it was really weird. And I'll never forget it, too, because, like, her boyfriend at the time, like, kept texting and stuff. Like, he's like, I know you were, like, going to a dude's house. She's like, he doesn't know you're my ex. I went, I already hate all of this right now. Like,
awkward.
Why do you do
Cringe.
that? And, yeah, a huge cringe. And I'm just going to also point this out to everybody who's listening. If your partner is so jealous of everybody, or, like, if it's a female and she's actually like, I have this guy friend, and like, let's say like your partner, he or she is just like, well, I don't want them around you. And it's like, what's going on with you?
Sure.
Like, if they do nothing but hit on you, that's one thing. It's like, but if you're at the point where I've had to do it a few times where I've had female friends are like, so my boyfriend or my husband or anything, they're like, they don't really know you. So I told them that you were gay. So you're like someone of a less threat. I went, I'm like, first of all, why are you lying about that? I'm like, there's no point to it. Because when I meet them, they're gonna know I'm not.
Right.
Because I'm gonna talk to them, and then there's gonna be the whole part. I'm like, yeah, I went on a date with this girl, and they'll be like, a girl?
Oh, awkward.
Yeah. And it's so stupid to me, because I'm like, just tell them. If they're jealous, they're like, oh, well, he's just gonna sleep with you. It's like, okay, well then meet me, and then trust me, you will know that I am not pursuing anything of that. Like, this is a cool friend. And honestly, it's like, I'm sure you have female friends, and you're just like, it's different. It's like, it's not different. It's not. If you're going to be jealous about your partner hanging out with like people that you're like, oh, but they're attractive and they might steal them from me. It's like, you don't have a solid relationship to begin with. Right. And that kills me about that. And so like, again, like I was seeing that with her, like he was constantly checking up on her. I'm like, did you not tell him that like we were hanging out? Or like you're hanging out with me, and I forget the friend's name. And like he knew, but I guess he like kept checking because he's like, well, like, what if something happened? She's like, what's going to happen? She's right here.
Yeah.
She's going to make sure nothing happens. Like, if there was, she's like, also, if he's going to be weird, we're going to leave. He didn't pick us up. Like, she drove us here. They could leave at any time. So it was very strange. But that was like the last time I really talked to her, because then she just kind of disappeared. She fucked off into basically the abyss for all I know. And, yeah. And I mean, I think last I heard, somehow when you and I were in San Francisco, I guess she was also like around us, but like we never ran into her.
Okay.
Which was weird.
Yeah.
I think it was like I saw on her Facebook that she actually was like, it was like the about, and it was like lives in, and I went, wait, she's here?
Got you. Okay.
And I went, where?
And
I almost wanted to reach out, but I was like, God, it's been years, and I don't want to be the person to reach out because I also don't care.
Sure.
But it was just so fascinating of how like you and I are there, and she was also there, and I was like, man, I was like, all we need now is Goma to come in, and like we gotta fucking party,
double
apparently.
date or whatever. The exes, yeah, that's fair.
But
cringe.
I don't know. It's so weird of how, exes come back into your life, and whether they have good intentions or bad intentions, we never really know until we actually get into it.
Sure.
And sometimes you can tell, but I mean, with him, for you saw like, the better, and you're like, like he's gonna be this way, and then, like you said, like a month when you guys saw each other, it all fell apart. And honestly, I thought you were gonna tell me like, yeah, in November or December, like at least a few months. Like in the story you were telling, it sounded like it lasted a bit longer, but it was a month. Yeah, that's what's crazy. He freaked out. He did all these things, and I mean, for me, she just, she didn't know what she wanted, but she wanted me back in her life for a bit, and then when she found something better, I was like, well, like, this is happening. I went, okay, great. Like, then obviously we don't have to do this. And I think she wanted like a fight, and I'm like, I don't care. Like, I'm like, if you're gonna pursue someone, I don't want to be, in a sense, the speed bump or like a problem.
Sure.
Nobody should be.
Right.
Like it's just dumb.
Agreed.
So.
Yeah.
But, and as you said, you two have not talked since, right?
No, not at all. Our last conversation was the middle of September. I don't know the exact date, but it's just funny to think about that he was a big part of my 2020, and now he's not a part of my life at all.
God, that's crazy.
He was, he came back into my life in February. Things started to heat up, obviously, after my relationship that ended in May, and June, July was like, okay, yeah, I'm feeling some type of way. Can't wait to see you in August. And it was nice and nostalgic. I was so excited to see him, just like I was excited to see him when he came visited and me at that stupid going away birthday party, graduation party from all those years ago. And it felt like that. And I felt so excited to look forward to someone even during the year of 2020, and I was excited to see him. It was just nice to like feel wanted and feel romantic with somebody, even though I was just kind of reeling off a relationship breakup, and whatnot. But it was good, and it happened really hot and passionately, and then it stopped abruptly in September, and then I was like, okay, fine. Don't know what happened there. You're not talking to me, I'm not talking to you, and we've never talked since. Now, if you were to come back into my life, I would just have to tell him, listen, it's not going to work out, because since then I've done a lot of work on myself. I've done a lot of shadow work. I've done a lot of healing, spiritually, emotionally, physically, and I feel like I'm in a much better place than I was.
Absolutely.
Obviously before he came back into my life. And so I'm like, all right, I feel like I'm just kind of preparing myself for the right one, the one I hope to marry. So yeah, I want to say that he was just like he was a test. He was the last final test. Come full circle. He was the first and he's the last.
Yeah.
He was the test. Come full circle.
And what you want and everything.
Of course. And now I'm just like, okay, I hope he has a really great life. I hope that he heals from his relationship because from what I remember, it didn't end so well.
Right.
And I felt for him. That pulled at my heartstrings, and that's why I wanted to be there for him. So I wanted to be his crutch, kind of, because he was mine also. And I don't regret that, but on to the next and on moving forward and not going back to exes is probably healthier for me.
And honestly, that's the best advice right there. Anything you think you're like struggling with, you're like, maybe I should move forward.
Sure.
You can only go forward, and honestly, it can only get better.
Yeah.
And I actually really like that because it works the best with relationships, but it's also going to just make you feel better. And like you said, you took time to better yourself. You're like, you know what? I know who I want to be, who I am. So, well, I'm really glad we got to do a part 2 of like a before and after of this. So it was really fun. As we did last time, cheers to my ex.
Cheers to my ex.
Thank you, Maricella, for joining. Everyone listening, thank you so much again. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your week.
Of course. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to X Marks the Spot podcast. Episodes are released every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific Time. Be sure to follow us on all social media platforms. Just simply look for X Marks the Spot podcast. If you have a story you'd like to share and be on the show, please feel free to reach out at xmarksthespotpodcast@gmail.com or DM us on any of our social media. Thank you again for listening.